Welcome everybody to the first online preparatory meeting that is going to discuss the 11th Assembly of the World Council of Churches. We are now moving to the presentation, the main presentation and main point of discussion today, the 11th Assembly of the World Council of Churches. And I would like to give the floor to my colleagues from the World Council of Churches, Mr. Doug Chill, Director of the Office of the General Secretariat, Ms. Charlotte Bellot, Assembly Administrator, Reverend Matthew Ross, Program Executive of Diaconia and Capacity Building, and I think that Reverend Dr. Benjamin Simon, Program Executive for Church Relations, is joining us a little bit later in the session. So the floor is yours. We are really eager to follow the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Katerina. And it's good to be here with all of you in a preparatory meeting with European delegates and participants to the WCC 11th Assembly. Very grateful to the Conference of European Churches for helping us all prepare together for the pre-assembly that took place not too many days ago, and for this opportunity today to share with all of you some general information about the assembly, and again to be with you tomorrow to share more information specifically about the business of the assembly. We have prepared a short presentation, not wanting to take too much of your time, hoping that we might inspire you or confuse you to ask a number of questions, because this is your assembly, and it's going to be a wonderful assembly because you will come prepared, ready, and motivated to be present as delegates or as other participants. So we will begin. Charlie and I will lead this presentation. Matthew, jump in if you wish. You may get some questions also, and our colleague Benjamin will also be joining in. Charlie, why don't we go to the next slide? So what we'd like to do today is to tell you a little bit about what an assembly is, who comes, why it's important, what's going to shape the assembly, where it's going to take place, what's going to happen when you're there, and where you can find more information. So just briefly, what is an assembly? It's first and foremost a gathering of faith and fellowship. I like to think of it as the largest family reunion that anyone has ever been to or organized. I'll ask briefly, how many of you have been to an assembly? Just go like this if you have. An assembly of the WCC or another ecumenical body. Okay, so a few of you have been to such an event, then you know what I mean. It's like a big, huge family reunion. This will be my 4th WCC assembly, and each one is very different. Each one is very new. Each one is very important because this is the highest governing body of the WCC. The buck stops here at the assembly. It makes not all the decisions for the World Council of Churches, but some of the most important decisions. It's the only space in which all of the member churches are present in order to be part of the work of the body. It normally meets every 8 years. Sometimes when a pandemic comes along, it is postponed. This is not the first assembly that was postponed. Assemblies have been postponed in the past because of war, insecurity, and this one was postponed because of a pandemic. An assembly will elect a central committee of 150 persons, presidents, 8 of them from around the world. We'll say more about that tomorrow. It sets directions, makes statements, reviews work, constitution, and finances. Again, a bit more of the business package of the assembly, and we'll go into that in detail tomorrow. as well as the way we make decisions in the WCC, whether we're in an assembly or a meeting of the Central Committee or the Executive Committee or just about any other body. We make decisions by consensus using orange and blue indicator cards. And again, we'll say a lot more about that tomorrow. How about the next slide, Charlie?
Yeah.
Let them know who's coming.
Many questions to who is coming to an assembly. When we talk about the Karlsrühe assembly, we imagine a very, very large gathering, a huge family reunion. There's actually up to 4,500 participants coming to Karlsrühe. So, but in what capacity? Well, as many of you are, we will welcome our delegates and advisors to the delegation from our member churches, up to 1,000. I think we're close to 800 and something number. We are extremely happy that today we have more than 90% of our member churches who will come to the assembly. So I don't know if it's the first time we've reached such a high number, but we are extremely pleased to have most of our member churches coming to the assembly this year. But the assembly is not only delegates. We also have what we call delegated representatives coming from ecumenical partners. So I'm thinking, well, first of all, the regional ecumenical organizations such as KEC. I'm thinking also about National Council of Churches from everywhere in the world. Church World Communion, International Ecumenical Organization, many different bodies that are in association with the World Council of Churches. We also have what we call delegated observers from our sister churches. We also have advisors, observer, guests. I mean, a lot of different capacities coming from everywhere in the world. And we also have our friends, the guests of other faith coming to the assembly. And we have a large youth component. So, of course, you know, an assembly is never possible without our stewards. We have more than 160 stewards coming also from everywhere in the world that will be helping us during the assembly. But we have also the Getty, Getty students, so the Global Ecumenical Theological Institute 2022 that will take place at the same time of the assembly in Karlsruhe, will be with us in the mornings, every mornings at the assembly. And we have our ecumenical youth gathering. And this is not gonna bother me anymore. And then we have everybody else. Whoever is interested in coming to the assembly can now register since actually this Thursday, 3rd of March, on WCC website, but we'll talk about more about the practical information in the next slide. So I think this gives an overview of who comes to an assembly. All right, Doug, I think this one is for you.
Okay. This is the 11th Assembly. So that means there have been 10 before. That is somebody who really wants to register right now and can't wait for Charlie to answer the phone. This is the 3rd Assembly that'll take place in Europe. The first Assembly, the inaugural Assembly, took place in 1948 in Amsterdam under the theme Man's Disorder and God's Design. The second Assembly to take place in Europe was Uppsala, 1968. Where the assembly gathered under the theme, Behold, I make all things new. And now we come to Karlsrühe in 2022 with the theme, Christ's love moves the world to reconciliation and unity. If you'd like to know more about past assemblies, we have a wonderful video on the WCC website. There's a 15-minute version if you want to go in depth, and there's a 7-minute version if you just want to know the most important things. What's really important, I think, is to understand that an assembly is marked by when it takes place, where it takes place, and what is happening in the world when it takes place. And we'll look at that a little bit in relation to this assembly. But I just want to say a word again about Amsterdam, Uppsala, and Karlsruhe, because these were major moments, like every assembly in the life of the fellowship. And if I think about Amsterdam, a very famous resolution was made by those delegates. They said, we intend to stay together. You can imagine how important that was in 1948, after a world war, after many decades of wars of religion, particularly among Christians. That was what the first assembly said. The first delegates who came from 148 churches at that time, they said, we are brought together and we intend to stay together. And that's become a very important driving force for the WCC. Uppsala 1968 is famous for addressing social unrest and creating the program to combat racism. A very focused program that sought to help dismantle apartheid throughout Southern Africa. A major legacy in the work of the churches together for justice and human dignity. And now we come to Karlsrühe. I don't need to explain to you the world we are living in, the fears that we have, the anxieties that we share, and the hopes that we want to kindle as we move together to Karlsrühe, embraced by Christ's love. So if you want to know more about the history of past assemblies, check out the videos on the WCC website, and they will inspire you, not only about the past, but the future. On to Karlsruhe, Charlie.
All right, so we are on our way to Karlsruhe, to Germany. We are extremely happy for the invitation of the Evangelical Church in Germany and to go to Karlsruhe. If you have never been to Karlsruhe, it's a key city. It's a human-sized city. It's not a megapole. It's not a very small town. It's a city that will welcome and is looking really forward to welcoming the WCC 11th Assembly. It's a city of tolerance, really, where I think all are welcome. We are actually lucky that our colleague Benjamin, I don't know if he's already here, but he's actually from Karlsruhe. So if you have any question about the city, he will be probably most happy to talk to you about it. Karlsruhe is also the home of the Church of Baden, who actually celebrated last year the 200 years anniversary of their unification. And it's the home of the Supreme Court. So it's a very important place for Germany. And the situation of Karlsruhe is very ideal because we like to emphasize that this assembly is not a German assembly. It's really a regional assembly with, in the host committee, of course, the Evangelical Church of Germany, but also the Swiss Protestant churches and the churches in France. So if you have a look at the map of Europe and you see where Karlsruhe is, just under Frankfurt, just above Basel, and just on the right of Strasbourg, it's really a key place for us to bring our next assembly. So I don't know if, Doug, you wanted to talk about this next slide, what shapes an assembly?
Yeah, I will. Thank you, Charlie. We've just said something about the geographical location. Where the assembly takes place and who is hosting it matters. It sets a flavor. It sets it's an invitation to come and be with the churches in that place. And as Charlie mentioned, we're meeting in Karlsruhe. It's in the center of Europe. It's an invitation from churches in France, Switzerland, and Germany to join them in this place that they like to refer to as a trans-border space, a place where Europe comes together. And this is the first time that I know that an assembly is hosted by churches from more than one country. The last time the churches in South Korea were hosting the assembly. Of course, all of the churches in Asia were welcoming us, but this is quite unique to this assembly. The historic moment, the time we are living in, the time when we meet, September 2022, a time of recovering from a pandemic, a time of war, a time of crisis. This is the world we are living in. This is the historical moment that we share that will also shape this assembly. But the cultural context, what's happening in society. We're living in a society where we have increased evidence of inequalities, racism, discrimination. It's not getting better. In many places, it's getting worse. And social movements and the churches are responding. This assembly comes at a time after great consultation among the churches on what it means to be the church together, renewed interest and inspiration for our unity, making our unity in Christ visible to the world. All of these elements create a mood, a tone, and shape the outcomes and the directions of an assembly. And that's why it's incredibly important that you are taking your preparation seriously, because you are the delegates and the participants that will give shape to this assembly. This is your assembly. What it does and what it says depends on you and your churches. Let's go to the next slide, Charlie. Let's think a little bit, about what's going to inspire this assembly. First and foremost, the theme. For those of you who are participated in the KEK pre-assembly, I know you had already opportunity to begin exploring the theme. I want to emphasize just a couple things as we did in prayer today. The theme, Christ's love moves the world to reconciliation and unity, is a little unique in the history of the WCC. It's the first time that we see the term love reflected in the assembly theme. And this is very much rooted in the text we read today from Colossians, and a love by which we are expressing the love of God in Christ for all creation. This is not a love of sentimentality or simple relationship. It's the love of God in Christ for all creation. It's a love that transforms and reconciles. It's a love that is salvific. It is a love intended for all. And a key text with this theme, of course, is 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and the call upon us as followers of Christ to be ministers of reconciliation, the urge, the need to go into the world, to make disciples, to bear witness to the love of Christ for all creation. Something that will mark this assembly are the stories of Christ's compassion. Every day, worship, thematic plenaries, and discussion in home groups will focus on stories of Christ's love in action, motivated by this text, Matthew 9, a text that comes in summary, if you will, of many missions of Christ's ministry. After going to all of the villages, after having seen so many things, Christ reflects and says, or we are told that when he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless and like sheep without a shepherd. You may feel that way. Christ's love knows us in that way and is caring for us in that way. Each day, different stories of Christ's compassionate love will motivate the assembly to follow him in discipleship. And of course, the global realities of our times, these megatrends or these signs of our times, these will shape the assembly. These are things that you know, things that you observe in the news, things that you observe in your communities, the impact of the pandemic, the impact of the climate emergency, growing inequality and racism, authoritarian politics, militarization, war, but also hope. Hope that together we can be a different world. Hope that with other faiths, we can respond accordingly. So these are some of the things that I think will inspire the assembly. In addition to this are your experiences of church and life and witness. They will also inspire the assembly. Thanks, Charlie. I think we're on to the next slide. I think you begin this one, don't you, Charlie?
I'm really happy to explain a little bit more. Probably that's why many people want to hear about what will actually happen in Karlsrühe. I mean, we hear that we're here to meet with the fellowship. We're going to celebrate also being back together and many other things. But what actually makes an assembly? What is the program of the assembly? So you heard encounter, you heard fellowship. We are very lucky with the host churches. They're really developing that encounter part and that fellowship part. Actually, there's such a great excitement in Germany that the venue cannot host everybody that is interested. So when I say we have up to 4,500 participants who will probably come to the assembly, this does not involve all of our regional participants. So the Karlsruhe Assembly local office that we call KALO is actually developing an ecumenical encounter program, which will take place parallel to the assembly in Karlsrühe. So there will be, I think, around six different venue hubs where they will be able to dialogue on the same subject as the assembly in more in-depth in the region. They will be also able to watch the live streams coming from our thematic plenaries, from our Bible studies, from the morning prayer. So that will be more the encounter part side that will take place in Karlsruhe. But coming back to the assembly, and especially as you are delegates and, let's say, official participants, you know that if you're very familiar with WCC assemblies, you know that we carry very, I think, close to our hearts, the pre-assemblies. As you can see on the slide, there are 4 pre-assemblies: the Indigenous People pre-assembly, the Ecumenical Disability Advocates Network pre-assembly, the Just Community of Women and Men pre-assembly, and finally the Ecumenical Youth Gathering. The 4 events will take place simultaneously over 2 days prior to the assembly. But I think what differs this time is that there are not just 4 different events taking place before the assembly. They will actually gather during worship and during, of course, lunch and dinner, but also they will gather for joint plenary, because their idea is that their outcome will really be carried out by the participants of this pre-assembly through the assembly. And they wanted to have this one voice to be heard at the assembly, together as a common voice. So 4 very strong pre-assemblies taking place in Karlsruhe just before the assembly. And now that we enter, let's say, more the assembly, every day will start, of course, and will end with a prayer. And prayer time will be open to all on the venue to gather, to worship together before and after the, let's say, the hustle of an assembly day. We will need this time in the morning and in the evening to focus, to reflect, to worship, to be together, and to maybe after they cool down and focus on the text of the day that are every time linked to the theme of the day. The prayer time will take place outside under, let's say, a giant tent, a magic sky. It's actually going to be a prayer tent that will stand in the middle of the venue. It's really going to be the heart of the assembly in the middle of the venue. And this tent can accommodate up to 3,500 people. So you can imagine it's a very large structure. And this prayer tent and prayer will be a very special time at the assembly. Then the prayers will be followed by thematic plenaries. And I think Doug will talk a bit more about that.
Thank you, Charlie. I think we can already look at the next slide as well, so we can understand what's happening when. As Charlie mentioned, we begin every day with prayer. And after prayer, the assembly moves to thematic plenaries. There are 5 thematic plenaries during the assembly. And the first takes place on the 1st of September, the day of creation. And it will be a great joy to be gathered as an entire fellowship on the day of creation to celebrate that moment together. And the thematic plenary on that day will explore God's love in Christ for the whole creation and the purpose of reconciliation and unity. It will be a plenary that unpacks the theme, if you will, that explores the theology and the context of what it means to be followers of Christ, what it means to be part of God's creation. The second thematic plenary is on Europe, and it's inspired by the biblical text for the day, the story of the Good Samaritan. Every assembly has a thematic plenary sponsored with the region, and this is being prepared under the leadership of my colleague Matthew Ross, but together with Keck and other partners in Europe. You can imagine it will address major issues such as militarization, migration, secularization, but it's also an opportunity for the churches in Europe to share with the global context, and reflect together on what it means to be the church in the world that we are living in. There will be a third thematic plenary focused on the wholeness of life, addressing some of the interrelated megatrends of militarization, climate, emergency, health issues, and economic issues. These matters that are intertwined and in many ways influencing our world, and an opportunity to understand what is happening and how the churches are responding. The fourth thematic plenary focuses on affirming justice and human dignity. It is inspired by the text of Jesus' encounter with the Canaanite woman, and it's an opportunity to continue looking at systemic issues related to race, gender, youth, disabilities, experiences where human dignity is denied, and what it means to respond as the church in situations like that. The fifth thematic plenary, is on Christian unity and the church's common witness, a plenary that seeks to describe how the churches are moving forward and responding together to the signs of our times, the issues in our world, and the vision of unity and reconciliation that we are following. Each morning we meet for prayer. We continue reflecting on what we believe and the world we live in thematic plenaries. And then we move to home groups. You will move to home groups. Home groups are an opportunity to continue the discussion, to continue reflecting together. Home groups are a new feature for WCC Assembly. They are small groups, 20 to 30 delegates meeting together each day to share, to reflect. No major agenda, no reports are needed, but witnessing together, sharing together what it means to follow Christ, and strengthening one another in that concept of living as disciples who are helping to transform the world. Other participants will attend plenary Bible study, where they will have the opportunity to be in conversation and be inspired by the texts of the day. And that's a bit what the morning holds in store. Deep spiritual, theological, contextual reflection, and an opportunity to share with one another what that means for our lives, for our churches, and for our world. Charlie, I think if we go back, we can pick up the next element. Ecumenical conversations. Ecumenical conversations are a space for sustained dialogue on specific issues. There are 23 different ecumenical conversations. And later in the spring, you will be asked to make a choice. First choice, second choice, third choice, which conversation you would like to be a part of. The conversations are around topics related to the mission of the church, to evangelism. They relate to issues of faith and order. They relate to, there's one on theological education. There's conversations on peace building. There's conversations on gender justice. There's a conversation on human sexuality. There are conversations on climate justice. There are conversations on all sorts of topics that are of concern, interest to our churches, things that we've been working on together, things that need further work together. And each of you will be asked to join a single conversation. You'll be asked to join it for 4 consecutive days in order to have time to look at an issue, to share different responses to an issue, to think together about how we move forward in addressing that issue as a fellowship of churches. The results of ecumenical conversations will be submitted to the first central committee after the assembly. And that body of material is meant to significantly inform how the future work of the World Council of Churches will be done, the issues that it will engage the churches in responding to. So as I mentioned, you'll have an opportunity to sign up for a conversation, and we ask you to be committed to that conversation, to learn, to share, and to help give direction for the future. Another thing we'll do in Karlsrühe is a lot of business. There are reports, there will be committees, there will be an election, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. So if that is really interesting to you, please come back tomorrow for more information about that. We also have regional and confessional meetings, opportunities to come together under the leadership of our regional ecumenical organizations and Christian World Communions. The Assembly is, on the one hand, an expression of the member churches in the WCC. It's also an expression of the one ecumenical movement. And these two ways of being together in the WCC, based on where we come from and based on our church family, are important points of connection. And those events usually take place in the evening. Charlie, why don't we have a look at the schedule again so we can see how that happens? You see on the second half of the day that we move into business plenaries and ecumenical conversations and opportunities for regional meetings or confessional meetings or other things scheduled for the close of day. Now, I think, Charlie, I'd ask you to say a word about the Brennan program, another element of the WCC Assembly.
Sure, and I love to talk about the Brennan program. It's the fun part, I mean, if I can say so. Why is it my favorite part? Well, for those who don't speak German, like me, Brennan in German means the well. And similarly to a well that you would find in the middle of a village, where people will come and gather to collect water, to talk with their neighbors, we really envisioned a similar version of our Brennan. So our Brennan, actually located right next door to the prayer tents, also at the entry of the venue, will host many different components. We'll have exhibition spaces. We'll have around 90 pagodas. We'll have a large networking zone with our main partner of the Assembly. We'll also have a large catering area. We'll host workshops, and we'll have, finally, performances. We have, for example, dancers coming from the Pacific. We have musicians coming from Europe, and many different, what we call side performances. We really envision the Brennan to be a very active area with always something going on, but also a place for participants to take a break, to network, and just to enjoy the Assembly. So if you have a look at the program, you will see that this word Brennan is actually there almost for the whole day. Once the thematic plenaries are done, the Brennan will open during the coffee break and will remain open until we finish dinner. So it will be a time for really anyone coming to the Assembly to be able to take a break from the different business elements or thematic elements, but to really network and to share together. This is what we envision for the Brennan space. So it will be a very active and lively space. And I think these are the elements we wanted to talk about the program. So very intense days. It will be very busy, but there will be also spaces for you to actually reflect, relax, digest everything that you've just listened to, and a great place to network after so many years being away from each other. So that's why we wanted to talk about the program. And before we finish our presentation, we wanted to give you some Assembly resources. So Doug, do you want to start?
I will. And just to say about your days at the Assembly, I would recommend that you protect yourselves a little bit, decide what you're committed to. As Charlie mentioned, these are really long and tiring days. Hopefully they're inspiring days, but as she's mentioned, there's ways to have the day that you need. There's the official program, there's the Brennan program, and there's even a zoo. and a forest. This city has everything you could ever want, all within walking distance. So you will enjoy your time. But in terms of some of the resources that are already available and some of the questions we anticipate you might have, just want to remind you that the website is, of course, the best place for information. And when you go to the WCC website, oikumene.org, you will very quickly see a way to go to the assembly, where you have a variety of buttons for the types of information you want, resources, practical information, past assemblies, etc. Right now, we're highlighting a series of Bible studies based on the liturgical calendar. So as we are not all quite in Lent yet, some of us are in Lent and some of us are getting ready for Lent, but there's a Bible study for the season of Lent. There's a Bible study for Holy Week, a Bible study for Easter Sunday, a Bible study for Ascension, for Pentecost. And if you missed them, you can go back and catch up on Bible studies for Advent and for Christmas. There's also a resource recently published detailing the history and the journey of the WCC from the last assembly to this assembly, from Busan to Karlsrühe. The history of the WCC is often written in this way: from Busan to Karlsrühe, from Porto Alegre to Busan, from Harare to Busan. So come and be a part of the history of the WCC, or catch up on the past 8 years and the work of the fellowship during this time. I recommend to you a theme reflection that you'll find on the website. It describes, I would say, much of the biblical inspiration, theological inspiration in the theme, but it also does so against the backdrop of critical issues confronting churches and humanity as a whole. It's an inspiring reading that helps deepen reflection on the theme. There's also a lot of practical information, and you may have questions about that in this meeting. Entry requirements. As we've all become used to, moving around the world has become more complicated because of COVID. And so you will need to pay attention to what are the requirements for entry to Germany. But there's practical information on the program, lots of things that Charlie and I mentioned in more detail. And about every 4 to 6 weeks, we are publishing an assembly newsletter with the type of information that you need now. And so you can go back and review various newsletters. I'll let Charlie pick up some of the practical details now because she knows them better than I do.
Sure. So if you are a delegate or an advisor, or if basically you have received an invitation to come to the assembly, you must have also received the link to register. If it's not the case, you're always welcome to email me. The assembly address is there and I'll add it in the chat. But if maybe your colleague who is very interested in coming to the assembly wants to register, she or he is very welcome to do so. If you are subscribed to our newsletter, you would have seen that every 6 to 8 weeks now, we try to send an assembly newsletter, so specific for the assembly. The second one was actually sent out on Thursday. And since Thursday, the public registration for the assembly is open. So I warmly encourage anyone who is interested in coming to the assembly to go either way to the website or to the newsletter, and there is more information on how to register. Regarding program elements, you might wonder, well, I've seen on my registration form that I need to register my personal information, my passport information. What about the program? Because, I mean, we are here for the program. No worries. We are, of course, not forgetting the program elements. We are, since the Central Committee has approved more program elements last month, we will be publishing the conversation sign up, the weekend program that the local office is organizing, as well as workshops and any other program elements will be available to choose from. I think it will be right after Easter. Let's give us Easter time to to actually finalize this work and make it available. But no worry, it is coming. Similarly, you might be wondering, what about hotels? I saw that hotels will be soon available, but how can I come to Karlsrühe? Should I book a hotel room myself? The answer is that we got it all covered. So WCC has made arrangement with the local tourist information, and we have booked actually more than 100 hotels in Karlsruhe and in the region. We have more than 3,000 rooms reserved for our assembly participants at the best prices. And we are currently working on giving you a full list of hotels so you can choose what kind of hotel you want. As soon as hotels are available to book from, so it will be also on the same platform as your registration form, you will receive an email. So don't worry if you don't see anything, it's coming up. We have not forgotten you, and there will be room for everybody. So in case you have any question today, but maybe tomorrow or the day after, feel free to always, maybe not call me, but email me at assembly@wcc-coe.org. And I think this is what we wanted to say, Doug.
This is what we wanted to say, and we hope that you'll have questions, because we love answering questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much.